Welcome to The Golden Shadow, the podcast about psychology, philosophy, myth, mysticism, and mystery. My name is Arran Rogerson.
And I'm Alyssa Polizzi.
Today we are talking about the big 5 personality traits. We took a break from recording the podcast because both of us were sort of on vacation, you might say.
Yep.
Alyssa was in the desert.
Road trip.
I was backpacking for a little while in the forest. Now we're back.
Back and better than ever.
Back and better. I hope so. I guess we'll find out, though. So the big 5 personality traits.
Yeah.
This is, of course, a paradigm for understanding different personalities.
Yeah, it's a personality model.
And we picked this topic because it's useful to understand who you are. Obviously, understand who other people are.
Yeah.
Understand the variation there is within people's personality types that kind of lead to the way that they approach the world, approach relationships.
Right. In the greater discussion of knowing oneself and also understanding the unique nature of others, following these pathways of, sort of established personality dynamics, behavioral tendencies can be very helpful. And the Big 5 is interesting because it's got a lot of roots in history in research of personality and behavioral tendencies of individuals. And so it's got more of a empirical backbone to it.
Right. It's a little more legitimate compared to Myers-Briggs,
Yeah.
for instance.
Yeah. It's definitely, I would say, a system that would be something a little bit more trustworthy because the way that they're testing it is a little bit more fleshed out than, say, the Myers-Briggs.
So the big 5 traits, there's 5 of them, of course.
Yes.
Within each trait, there are 2 sub-traits.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, one trait is openness to experience, and the 2 sub-traits are openness and intellect.
Yeah.
So it's a way to break down each trait further into a more detailed, high-resolution understanding of what that trait is actually referring to.
Mm-hmm.
When you are scored in the Big 5, you are given a percentage for each trait and each sub-trait.
Yeah.
For instance, if you scored a 95 in conscientiousness, that would imply that you are more conscientious than 95% of the population.
Yeah, that puts you in an incredibly high percentile, which means like you hold that trait in a much more important or readily accessed position than, so many other people in society. And so that's a really important one to pay attention to.
Right. By comparison, you might score a 5 in conscientiousness, which would imply that you are more conscientious than 5% of the population. So that's a very low score.
So not very conscientious.
Not very conscientious, but that's how this system works. It's scored as a percentage. Each trait has a percentage.
Yeah.
And again, that implies how you relate to the population or how you relate to the average, let's say. So a score of 50 means you're average.
Yeah, you're average, normal.
Okay, so...
So why did we pick the Big 5?
Why did we pick the Big 5?
Yeah, because we took the test.
Well, we took the test.
About a year ago.
Yeah.
And we found it helpful.
Yeah.
We thought it expressed some things that we understood about ourselves, but at the same time revealed some more interesting insight. So,
definitely. I mean, it's useful taking a test like this, especially if you can feel confident that it actually means something. And it's not just kind of like a fun, sort of BS online test that you take that explains.
These 10 questions will reveal to you your entire personality.
Right. 10 ways in which you might be astral projecting without knowing it. We can talk about astral projection in a different episode.
That would be a fun one to cover.
Not to dismiss it or anything, but still, there's a lot of, you might say, resources out there that actually are not very helpful in understanding yourself, and they may be kind of misleading. Big 5 does seem, as you said, to be grounded in empirical evidence and should be treated maybe with a little more confidence.
Yeah, I think so.
And again, we took the test. It helped us articulate who we are.
Yeah.
And it also helped us articulate who other people are.
Yeah.
And it's helpful to understand relationship dynamics by understanding people's personality types.
Right.
And you could theoretically take the Big Five test with your partner, let's say, and you could understand the ways in which, especially if you can read a good guide, a good explanation to the test, you could understand the ways in which the two of you come in conflict,
right,
purely based on your personality, and which is something that we tend to kind of think that like, well, they're wrong and I'm right, when the truth might be, well, no, the two of you are just approaching the problem differently.
Yeah,
and it's important to understand how you can reconcile those differences.
Yeah.
So just this kind of paradigm gives you the language and the tools to be able to articulate who you are to yourself, which is really useful, and articulate who you are to other people and who other people are to you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So let's dive in.
Let's dive in. So there are 5 traits, Big Five traits. So the acronym you can use to name each trait is OCEAN, OCEAN. The first trait is openness to experience. The second trait is conscientiousness. The third trait is extroversion. The fourth trait is agreeableness. And the fifth trait is neuroticism. And again, each of those traits can be broken down into 2 subtraits. And we're going to go through each one and try to get a grip on what they mean and what they look like, how they manifest. So, openness to experience. This might be the most difficult one, I think, to convey, which is good to start out with it. So, how might we define openness to experience? How might we explain it?
Moving into territory that explores creativity and curiosity, people who have artistic tendencies or artistic interests, or even those who have a desire to kind of step into the intellectual world in a more explorative manner. All of this starts to fall under that openness to experience. You can think about you, whether that's your own consciousness or your own intellect, your thinking function being open to experience, or maybe a more feeling function, kind of looking for a connection to other people, or travel, or going out and experiencing art.
Right,
all of that starts to build into that.
Yeah, openness, is a key word. It can be kind of confusing to like, what does openness mean in terms of person? What does it mean to be open? But we are referring to how much are you willing to absorb new things, or what new things move through you, let's say, and that might be new experiences.
Yes.
You might be really open to new experiences.
Yes.
You might really enjoy new experiences, like travel, as you said. You might enjoy experiences like doing drugs. You might enjoy trying different foods, experiencing different art forms. You might be more open to strange, unfamiliar things, and you might be stimulated by that kind of thing, activated by it.
Activated,
So curiosity, exploration, creativity, all these words we kind of associate with openness to experience. We can break openness to experience down to 2 subtraits, and this can be kind of confusing, but one of those subtraits is openness. And the second is intellect. And so openness as one of these subtraits of openness to experience, what does that refer to?
That's more of the realm of the new experience, the kind of more experiential dynamic. So that could be interest in exploring art and music, and in more embodied openness, like through dance and exercise, movement, adventure, the desire to kind of go out to new places, to meet a lot of new people, to just sort of move through the world, experiencing things through all these different, maybe even sensory kind of dynamics as well.
Yeah, so openness, definitely experiential. Again, it's hard to be very technical with the way we describe these things. We're just trying to get the best kind of loose idea of what they mean. But openness kind of is aesthetic, creative. How open you are to experience is probably the best way to explain it. And this is as opposed, you might say, to intellect, the other subtrait of openness to experience. And so intellect kind of might refer to more of an interest in new ideas, an interest in the abstract realm of new things. So people who are high in intellect are very curious in
philosophy,
systems, abstract ways.
Getting more meta.
Getting meta is a good way to describe it. How likely are you to be stimulated by weird conversation that goes into very distant realms?
Like getting kind of heady.
So anyone who likes to read a lot of books, for instance, you might say they're high in intellect.
Yeah.
If you were going to bring up sort of like, what's the meaning of life, or how do we define what reality is?
Yeah. What is truth?
What is truth? Again, these are big questions, and a lot of people are really interested in talking about that. They find that so activating. A lot of people are really turned off by that.
Yeah, or it just feels really overwhelming.
It feels overwhelming. They might roll their eyes.
Yeah.
It's important to emphasize that intellect does not mean intelligence.
Yes.
And in fact, none of these traits that we're going to talk about
they don't
in the Big
correlate
Five,
to that
they
at
don't
all.
correlate to intelligence, and that's important to understand. If you are low in intellect, this does not mean you're stupid. That's not a good way to think of it. Low in intellect just might mean you're not interested in abstract ideas.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with intelligence.
Yeah, your desire to sort of explore the intellectual frontier is just, it's not really there.
Yeah, and that might just speak to the way that you experience the world, or the way that you move through it. And you
might be more experiential. You might score high in openness and lower in intellect.
Right, exactly. So if for instance, if you were high in openness, low in intellect, you might be someone who's very experiential, very sensual.
Yes.
You really enjoy kind of like this more earthly feeling.
Yeah, it's more grounded.
Being grounded in the experience you're having and the people around you, and trying new things like that. And when someone brings up abstract philosophy, you might get bored.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on.
Yep.
So trait number 2 is conscientiousness.
Yes.
And conscientiousness can be broken down into industriousness and orderliness.
Yep.
So how can we describe conscientiousness?
Conscientiousness.
Big word.
Tongue twister. So I associate conscientiousness with individuals who have a strong propensity towards being responsible, disciplined, orderly, hard workers, really kind of seeking to create maybe order out of chaos, even guiding leadership qualities, especially the type of like managerial or just like hardworking people who like make up the foundations of God, like any major group or structure.
Right. How structured do you like things?
Yeah.
How much do you want things to be in the right place? How much do you want things to function correctly? You want things to flow efficiently?
Yeah.
How strong is your instinct for things to be organized and moving in their proper manner?
Yeah.
You might say. So people who are high in conscientiousness are usually pretty hardworking.
Yeah.
They're very diligent. They pay a lot of attention to detail.
Yeah. Yeah.
They are organized. Usually they like to keep things organized.
I think they have a strong drive and sense of duty as well.
Duty is big.
Yeah.
Feeling that rules are important, or feeling that there's a code that you should stick to. People who have like a strong personal code are usually pretty high in conscientiousness.
Yes.
Reliability, punctual.
Yeah.
All these things.
Yeah.
Someone who you feel like you can rely upon, and someone who sticks to their word.
Yeah.
Usually high in conscientiousness. Again, so if we break it down, you get industriousness and orderliness.
Yeah.
So what is industriousness?
How disciplined are you? How consistent? How reliable? How dependable? How trusting is your word when you give it to somebody? You know, the kind of individual who comes through, and not even maybe just because they want to keep the status quo, but because they sense inside of themselves that this is what's right. It's sometimes, I feel, as someone who's very conscientious, like it's something that almost like permeates through you. It's not just like because your mother taught you or your father taught you or society taught you this is the right thing. And you just feel it through every fiber of your being. And to not be disciplined or hardworking or reliable is painful or difficult.
Right.
So
yeah, I would say industriousness. Is more of a attention to the way things flow, and feeling instinctually that you need things to flow well,
Yeah.
that you hold yourself accountable, that you're very dedicated, and there's a lot of, not always, but there's a lot of guilt often associated with being highly conscientious.
I think
a lot of
so.
shame that you experience that you might
Yeah.
just impose upon yourself.
Right.
If you drop the ball,
Yeah.
you might feel really, really bad about doing that.
Yeah.
Like you might feel like I failed,
Yeah.
and that's not okay.
Yeah.
Someone who's low in industriousness, they might not care much if they drop the ball.
There's more carelessness, or just kind of like, well, that was my other team member's fault. And it's like, well, it was a group effort, right?
Yeah.
The conscientious individual is probably more likely to feel the weight of that burden upon their shoulder.
Right.
And that's because there's so much, I think, meaning being driven out of the structure or the capability of holding that flow and making sure things move well together. And when that falls apart, it's tough for the conscientious person.
Right. The other subtrait is orderliness, and this might be more associated with your environment, your attention to the way things are physically structured around you.
Yeah.
People who are very orderly don't like mess. They might organize their room in a really clean, really structured way.
Yeah.
They might, color coordinate their wardrobe or their bookshelves or stuff like that. They might vacuum every day.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's like the interplay of disorder that is part of the orderliness, and there's kind of like something that feels really good and sort of tight and locked in for the orderly type when the attention to detail is really taken into mind and things are in their proper place. So that could be like someone who's really on top of keeping lists or schedules or having routine, making sure that all these elements of their life are kind of controlled.
Yeah. And, it's important to emphasize this if it's not already clear. There's ways that all of these traits can be vice or they can be virtue.
Yes.
There's a lot of getting into what virtue and vice is a different conversation, maybe a different episode. That'd be interesting. But, virtue, we're talking about some kind of balance, and vice is sort of a disbalance and an unbalance. I don't know what the correct word is. But for instance, if you were overly orderly in an unbalanced way, if you scored a 99% in orderliness and it was a vice, this might be someone who is very, very controlling over their environment, and they get very upset.
It's overkill
if you change their environment.
Yeah.
So this is someone who might really find it difficult to live with others. They might want the kitchen to be arranged in their way, and they want things to be clean, and they can't tolerate you who are less clean than them.
Yeah.
But again, all these traits are interacting with one another.
Right, because they might have like a high neuroticism in that case, which makes it like really difficult to deal with the emotional affect.
And we'll get to that. But this obviously each individual is very complex. Personality is very complex, but it's important to understand like scoring high on any of these traits doesn't necessarily mean like good thing. Right? It could mean that you are just extreme, and extreme isn't always a good thing. In fact, it's often a bad thing. So scores of 99% or 1%, that's not just like, wow, you have superpowers. It's like, well, no, you might like be pathological. Like, so that's important to understand as we talk about these, that we're kind of describing each of these traits as being sort of like positive in some sense. Like this is people who are industriousness, like they're very like hardworking and disciplined. It's like there's a way to be way too industriousnness. Way too industrious. Anyways, we'll move on and try to tie these things together as we go. The next trait is extroversion. So we're all familiar with extroversion, probably, if we study psychology at all.
It's so embedded in the general lexicon. So we know that this often brings the correlation of an outgoing nature, someone who seems very energetic. The extroversion trait here deals a lot with the social component of our personality.
Right, the social dimension of the personality is very much
I think that's a good way to look at it.
Extroversion.
Yeah. So a lot of that is how do you act in social situations? How are you oriented socially?
Right. How do you approach other people when you enter a group situation, whether it's at work or it's like a barbecue or even if you're just hanging out in a bar, something like that. How do you approach this? So it's the way that you really make sense of the social world of other people, how to best treat other people, how do they fit into your life, and how do you fit into theirs. So we can break extroversion down into two subtraits, enthusiasm and assertiveness.
Yeah.
So what's enthusiasm?
This is exploring what is probably more classically associated with extroversion, which is like your connection to other people, or maybe like the energy you receive from being in these types of social situations. So it's about your connection to other people, the dynamic that's wrapped up in that, maybe your tendency then to express or show dynamics of emotion in relation to that. Do you feel activated by others? Are you also then kind of someone who's more expressive in nature? I think that obviously must be correlated since it's kind of wrapped up into this. So the enthusiasm trait does score kind of like an individual's tendency to be able to kind of tap into those joyous, happy, excitable emotions, and for people to be able to read that off of you.
Right, definitely positive emotion. People who are high in enthusiasm they experience a lot of joy with other people.
Yeah.
They're very turned on by other people.
Yeah.
Very gregarious. Do you just inherently enjoy other people?
Yeah.
Do you find other people to be fun and good? Do you like other people? Are you happier when you're in a group than when you're alone?
Yeah.
So just being stimulated by social interaction.
Yeah.
There are people who are very stimulated by others, and then they're usually high in enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Low in enthusiasm might be someone who finds other people or social situations to be incredibly draining.
Yeah.
And it's not activating. It's not stimulating.
Right.
It's tiring.
Yeah. So
it doesn't mean that you hate people.
Right.
It just means that you don't feel activated by them.
Yeah. So you're a little bit more cautious with your energy, more reserved, maybe more solitary, but can still maybe connect to other people in a more personal, more one-on-one capacity so that things don't quite get out of control as a bigger group might.
Okay, the other subtrait of extroversion is assertiveness, which is usually associated with leadership, putting one's own opinion forward, the motivation to seek out what you want or what you think is right.
Yeah.
We're all familiar with the concept of assertiveness. So someone who finds themselves in social situations and feels, it might not be like selfish, it might not be malevolent, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone is trying to be manipulative.
Yeah.
It might be just, or it's more correctly stated as someone who feels like they should put themselves forward to control the situation or influence the situation.
Yeah, I think initiative is like a good word for that.
Sure.
Those who take initiative, who feel driven to. It's like when the teacher asks, all right, so who wants to read this passage? And everyone's just like kind of looking around. The assertive one is going to say, I will. You know? They want to take that leap.
Yeah, and that's not always viewed as negative. It can be negative. Someone can be overly assertive.
Yeah,
definitely. The kind of person who tries to bend social situations to fit them is someone who's going to be pretty assertive.
Yeah.
But just it's a directness, it's an engagedness, it's definitely associated with leadership.
I think that type of individual also then matched in this category of extroversion then probably has more of that kind of gregarious personality type that we talked about. Someone who has a lot of energy. They kind of move through the group.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they're necessarily like wholly well liked by everybody, but they have an energy to them and they're not shy to put that forward.
Right.
And usually because they're sensing that there's a need for it.
Right. So someone who is high in enthusiasm and high in assertiveness might be considered like a party animal.
Yeah.
And obviously this is going to interact with all the other traits.
Yeah.
But still someone who really enjoys social situations and really tries to get what they want out of the social situations.
But also like, let's get things going, guys.
Yeah.
Like, yes, let's go to the next bar, like pushing the energy.
Right. The person who shows up and it's like, all right, like that person's here and it's like they're going to bring the
now
energy.
Now the party starts.
Right. Okay. The next trait is agreeableness.
Yes.
So agreeableness, as it sounds, is
friendly, compassionate, kind.
Someone, I would say, probably the best way to describe it is someone who cares sincerely for others.
Yes.
Someone who is willing to sacrifice their own needs often for other people's needs.
Yeah, they're very aware of not just themselves. And that desire to want to understand the dynamic or the status quo of another individual, it might be related to a kind of like empathic nature. You're in tune with other people's experience or emotional dynamics. And so how you're operating is not influenced by just what your needs are, but what other people's needs are too.
Right. This also ties into how compliant people are.
Yes.
How willing others are to cooperate or be obedient. So this can manifest in all these different ways, but it's basically how much are you putting the energy of others
before oneself.
Not necessarily always before oneself, but like you're like you said, there's awareness of other people's energies, what they need, and that's up there. It's a high priority for you.
Yeah.
And if it becomes a vice, let's say it could be that you are putting other people's energies so far above your own that you're not getting what you need.
Yes.
And no one's to blame for that except you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The balanced goal would be that you're caring for your own needs, but you're also very aware and caring for the needs of others.
So this can be broken down into 2 subtraits. The first subtrait is compassion.
Yeah.
The second subtrait is politeness.
Yeah.
So how do we describe compassion?
Compassion. How sensitive are you to others' needs and their well-being? What's your orientation towards those dynamics then? The interests of others, what would work best for them, what their desires are. It's kind of looking at individuals also sometimes through a greater lens of compassion, because you can think about like the compassionate parent is aware of what's good for you and what you need, but that might not necessarily be what you want. So sometimes compassionate guidance or advice or acts might feel undesirable to the person receiving it, but the compassionate individual might have that objective view that can see what is actually what is actually best for you, what would serve your greater good.
Right. So that's in contrast to politeness, which might be phrased. It's not the only way to think about this, but might be phrased as how sensitive are you to the other's wants. So compassion, let's say you're a parent and you're so compassionate that you really, really care about what's good for your child.
Yeah.
You really want them to do well. You really are doing everything you possibly can to make sure they have a good life. But if you are low in politeness, let's say, you might not care what your child wants.
Yeah.
You might not care if they're upset or if you might not care about hurting their feelings.
Yeah.
You might just do whatever it takes to do what's good for them. And I think this is a archetypal thing we see in parents sometimes, especially the father, is like the parent who cares about what's good for you and even thinks they know what's good for you.
Yeah.
And they don't really care what you say or what you need or what you want.
Yeah.
In any given moment.
Yeah.
So politeness, often people who are high in politeness are really going to be sensitive to how you feel in the moment, and they're really going to do the best they can to make sure that you feel comfortable and safe, that they're not going to say anything that's going to make you feel bad, they're not going to say anything that's going to set you off, that they're going to kind of play along with your experience and make sure you feel okay, as opposed to compassion where someone is maybe not really going to pay attention to your experience very much.
Yeah, someone can be highly compassionate but low in politeness as is mapped out here. So it's an important distinction to understand, because you can be the type of person who doesn't want to shake things up, that your politeness factor might be so high that you're really unwilling to express a difficult truth or something like that. Despite having a compassionate well within you that knows that what this person's doing just is actually a really bad idea.
Right.
So that politeness factor can make you seem quite agreeable and nice and kind, but it's there's an easy path towards pathology with that one, I feel.
Right. You can be kind of a pushover.
Pushover.
If you're extremely polite, but low in compassion.
Yes.
So you just want everyone to feel okay. You just want everything to be nice. You want everything to be sort of stable. You don't want there to be any conflict.
Yeah, don't shake things up.
And you're not necessarily, if you would low in compassion, you might really not in a deep way care about the well-being of anyone.
Yeah.
You're just conflict avoidant, let's say.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting dynamic there. Okay, the final trait is neuroticism.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting one.
Yes, this one was kind of an interesting one to wrap my mind around, because I think there's some ways that we jump to even understanding the word neurotic. But But the Big Five does a really interesting job of pulling apart what I feel is ultimately measuring one's emotional stability in relation to different environments, negative emotion, how you deal with affect, dynamics of guilt and shame and fear, sadness, all these tough emotional experiences. How sensitive are you to having those experiences, and what is the outcome then? That's kind of, I believe, part of what's being measured here. Also kind of to the sense of one's maybe even like instinctual safety is also part of this trait.
Definitely safety awareness. How likely are you to perceive threat?
Yeah.
How likely are you to sort of feel not okay?
Yeah.
Experience negative emotion, which is usually associated with something not being right, something seeming dangerous around you. Doesn't necessarily need to be like a literal danger, like there's a bear like around you, as much as it's just like someone might make you just sort of feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that can be very complex. But
Yes.
negative emotion.
Your resilience to that, should you be high in neuroticism, is probably quite low in that case.
So we can break neuroticism down into two subtraits, which are withdrawal and volatility.
Yeah.
So how would we describe withdrawal?
Here we're going into receptiveness of the negative emotion, or how you deal with the underlying affect of being in those experiences. So how does it feel when you experience fear, shame, anxiety, depression, sadness? How much does it affect you? How much do you worry about things? How likely are you to kind of have that sort of swinging pendulum of emotional dynamic, and how does it impact you?
So withdrawal, how likely are you to experience anxiety?
Yeah.
How likely are you to experience avoidance instincts, to withdraw from something, to back away, to feel as if you need to hide in some way, to recoil. And this is in contrast into volatility, which is how likely are you to respond with getting upset, being irritable, getting angry. So one way I like to kind of think about this is withdrawal is how likely are you to perceive that something bad is happening? How likely are you to actually respond that something's not right? Anxiety, how likely are you to feel uncomfortable? Whereas volatility is when you perceive that something's not right. How likely are you to respond outwardly, explosively, to reach out at other people, get angry, cry, scream.
To emote it.
Emote, just outward response that's really wearing it on the outside is kind of volatility. So if you were going to, again, talk about how these sort of interact, someone might be really high in withdrawal and really low in volatility. And that means that this kind of individual is actually extremely anxious. This kind of person doesn't feel very good most of the time, but you don't know it. They don't show it. They don't wear it outwardly. They might be freaking out and they look fine. And, a lot of people are like this. And people who might be low in withdrawal and high in volatility would be kind of an interesting combination, but they might not experience anxiety very often. They might not experience fear or feelings of being unsafe very often, but when they do, it's explosive. And so they might have weird episodes where every once in a while they freak out. And it's like, that hasn't happened in the last 6 months. And so the way that these interact is very interesting. Okay, that's all 5 traits. Now to try and tie things together, we're going to go through our scores. The scores that I have in all these traits and the scores that Alyssa has. And we're going to kind of compare and contrast our 2 different personalities and maybe talk about how they interact. And you're seeing that live on the podcast. Indeed. 2 different personalities interacting. So first we'll do openness to experience. My openness to experience is very high. It's 92%. Alyssa?
My overall score is 61%.
Okay. So Alyssa's 61, closer to average. The subtraits of openness to experience: intellect and openness.
Yeah.
My intellect is 92, very high, and my openness is 84.
My intellect is 41%. I'm average. And my openness is moderately high, 75%.
So I am more intellectual than Alyssa.
Yes.
And you can probably tell this just through listening to the podcast if you've been listening.
Yeah.
That I'm the half of this podcast that's a little more abstract and a little more sciencey philosophy and a little more into weird out there ideas.
Yeah.
Alyssa is a little more grounded.
Yeah, Arran wants to get meta, and I just can't go there all the time. Or I can't go as far as he can.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that Alyssa is stupider than I am. Though, well, that might be true.
We always joke about that.
But intellect doesn't.
It's not true.
Right. Intellect does not convey that I am really smart and Alyssa is very stupid. That's not the correct way to look at this.
Yeah, he's not smart.
Exactly. That's the point. But we're both high in openness, which is a sense of openness to experience. Alyssa and I are both
artistic,
creative.
musicians.
Clearly, we wouldn't be here doing this if we weren't.
Yeah.
And so we can definitely get along just in the kind of activities we're interested in, the kind of experiences we're interested in.
Yeah.
Approaching the world with this sort of creative mindset that you might associate with someone who's kind of like a hippie or someone who likes to travel, enjoys being outdoors,
we like to dance.
Like to dance.
We like music. We like to sing.
So a lot of the people that we are friends with are almost certainly high in openness for sure. Maybe not all of them are intellectual, but openness to experience is clearly something that brings a lot of people together because it's very experiential.
Yes.
Okay. Conscientiousness. Mine is 80, and I'll break them down into the subcategories. And my industriousness is 93, and my orderliness is 48.
My conscientiousness is 83%. My industriousness is 96%. I beat you, Arran. And my orderliness is 41%. We're pretty similar.
Pretty much the same.
We're pretty much the same here.
Yeah, I mean, the test does control for, or at least the best it can control is for how you are self-reporting,
Certainly.
right? So the differences between me and Alyssa and conscientiousness, they're so small that it's like basically we're kind of at the same place in this way. So we're both of us are very hardworking and very diligent.
Yes.
We're both kind of average in terms of orderliness. So.
Yeah, we're willing to kind of mess things up a little, kind of break the rules. You know, we don't necessarily want things to be perfect or hold very tight schedules.
Right. So messes don't really bother us that much. There isn't a feeling of like our living spaces need to be super organized.
Yeah.
We're okay with a kind of sort of loosey-goosey way of doing things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're very industrious, which means we both care a lot about what's right.
Yeah.
Care a lot about duty.
Commitment,
being reliable, being punctual.
Yeah.
So I think Alyssa and I both experience a lot of guilt when we feel as if we've failed.
It's a good expression of how that extreme nature, being what yours is 93, right?
Yeah.
93, 96, like we're extreme.
Right. So if I felt that I was being irresponsible, that would bother me quite a bit.
Yeah.
And if someone pointed out to me a way in which I was behaving like a child, let's say, that would really bother me.
Yeah.
That's not something that I can just shrug off.
Right.
And that's self-imposed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a lot of self-shaming comes from industriousness, which is the thing that's kind of interesting to acknowledge.
Yeah.
Okay, extroversion.
Yeah.
Mine is 77. The two subtraits are enthusiasm, which is 21, and assertiveness, which is 97 for me.
Yeah. My extroversion is 92%. My enthusiasm is very high, 89%. And my assertiveness is 88%.
So we're both very assertive. We both say what we think. We both want to put ourselves forward in a social situation and say this is how things should be.
Yeah.
We both volunteer a lot to be in leadership roles, to take on the burden of making sure a social situation works.
Yeah, definitely.
Works in quotations, however that might be interpreted. But contrastingly, I'm very low in enthusiasm, and Alyssa's very high in enthusiasm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I am much more of a people person in a lot of ways. My connections to others, my tendency to want to kind of move through people's life and find that personal connection. And then when I do, there's such an expression for me. It's very reflected in my work and in my personal relationships that when I connect to the people who kind of resonate with me, I express then deeply. I am someone who like will laugh a lot, and you can tell I'm very joyous.
Right.
And I'm in connection with others often when that's happening.
Right. Alyssa's very oriented towards other people.
Yeah.
Very stimulated by other people, very activated. She's at home with other people.
Yeah.
By comparison, I don't dislike people, obviously. I'm very social. I have a lot of friends that are very important to me. I have a lot of family that's very important to me.
Yeah.
But I don't get as excited and joyous by other people. I'm not the kind of person who's just like, wow, like this is great. Like, look at this great party. It's much as I'm kind of can acknowledge the goodness of a party, but
Right.
also really want to be alone a lot and really feel like I can rest if I'm alone.
Yeah.
Okay, agreeableness. I am low in agreeableness. My compassion is moderately high at 61. My politeness is very low at 4%, which people seem to find pretty comical. I find it comical.
It is funny. I'm very agreeable, very high. In fact, 93%. My compassion is 96%, and my politeness is 76%.
Right, so there's a big difference here between me and Alyssa.
Yeah.
And she is more willing to pay attention to other people's needs,
Yeah.
to take care of them. She's probably less likely to instigate a conflict or be confrontational or disrupt the harmony
Yeah. Yeah.
in a situation. She's more likely to be compliant with people and make sure that they can get what they need.
Yeah.
Whereas I am moderately high in compassion, so I definitely care a lot about other people.
Yeah.
And I clearly recognize this. I really want what's good for other people. I
Yeah.
really feel driven by trying to help other people.
Yeah.
But I'm very low in politeness, so I don't really care about their feelings very much. And so I will do things like I will hurt someone's feelings in order to do what I think is good for them.
Right.
Which is a weird, and people find it confusing because it's
Yeah.
very easy to interpret that as like, well, you're just an asshole. You don't care about anyone.
Right.
And it's like, no, I care more
Yeah.
about you than you do.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's sort of the difficult and confusing side of this.
Yeah,
Me.
because I think, especially with your much more intellectual nature, it's like you see kind of past the emotional part of it. And it's like, well, I know this is uncomfortable for you to hear, but this will help you.
Right.
And that's tough.
Right.
That's tough for people.
Very blunt.
Yeah.
I keep it real.
Yeah. Too real.
Too real often. All right. Neuroticism. I am very low in neuroticism. So my withdrawal is 3% and my volatility is 9%.
It's amazing. I'm average, 42%. My withdrawal is 36%, and my volatility is 48%. So, Arran, tell me what it's like to be you.
Yeah, I don't experience much negative emotion. I guess I don't experience much emotion at all. That's kind of how I am, is sort of like kind of monotone, and even in the way I talk. That's the way it is. But I don't experience much anxiety.
Yeah.
I don't really freak out very often.
Yeah.
I don't feel unsafe or threatened very much.
Yeah.
That does kind of tie in with my politeness. It's like I don't feel... Other people don't make me nervous.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid to get into most situations. And just anxiety is not really a thing for me. That doesn't mean that I don't experience some level of anxiety on an unconscious level. It doesn't mean I don't worry about things. But if I ever am volatile at all, which is not very often, it's probably like anger. I can occasionally have kind of explosive anger, but that's really, this has to do with conscientiousness as well.
Yes, yeah.
If I perceive something is not right, I can get really angry,
Yeah.
or I have a personal code that I think is very important to me, and I don't like breaking that code.
Yeah.
Or I might think that there's something that's very important for other people to do, and if they don't do it, I might get angry.
Yeah. I experience emotion in much more depth and color. Interestingly, I honestly felt when I took this like that my withdrawal should be higher.
Yeah.
Because I experience and I feel that emotion in a way that I feel like I should at least be average, but it's moderately low, but still.
It's compared to other people. You know, you might experience a lot of emotions, but it still might be less than the average person.
Yeah, I guess so. My volatility is average, and I think that I am someone who you can read my emotions on my sleeve. And I guess not in a way that it's like so destructive, but it's obvious.
Right. You're very outward in how you feel. You can't lie.
Yeah.
You can't pretend that you're not upset.
Yeah.
It's very easy if Alyssa like walks into a room to know what she's feeling.
Yeah.
So if something's ever wrong, it's like very obvious to me that something's wrong, and I can just see it immediately. Whereas you might not know if anything's wrong with me.
Yes.
Or if anything's right. You don't know anything.
And that's us, right?
That's us. So that's tying it all together, and you can take this test.
Yeah, we encourage you. This is your shadow homework, guys.
Yeah, this is the shadow homework. Find out who you are.
Yeah.
Examine you in a more high resolution, more sort of precise way, and you can use this language, this system, to really understand other people.
Yeah.
And that's what's so useful about this.
Yeah.
Do you have a question for us? Do you have a dream you'd like us to analyze? Is there a topic you'd like us to cover?
We want to hear from you. Contact us through a submission form, which can be found on our Instagram page at Golden Shadow Podcast. Or if you're listening on YouTube, you can find the link in the description down below.
Thanks for listening.
See you later.
If you find this podcast useful, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Golden Shadow Podcast. Thank you.